Hi there, this is Michael Becker. And in this session, as we dig in to understand the personal data and identity marketplace, I have with me today, Drummond Reed. Drummond, welcome.
Hi, glad to be here, Michael.
Thank you. And so Drummond is the Chief Trust Officer at Evernym. And our goal today over the next few minutes together is to be able to answer three questions. The three questions are, what is the personal data and identity marketplace? Where is it now and where is it going? The second question we're going to ask and dig into is, now that we know what this thing is and what's going on, the next question then would be, what do we need to know? And when I say we, I mean we, the individual, we, the leaders of private institutions, and we, the leaders of public institutions. And then finally, now that we know something, what do we need to do about it? What do we need to do now, tomorrow, in the future? How do we prioritize our do, if you will? That's what we're going to be talking about over the next, say 20 or 30 minutes. We'll see how it goes. So let's start out with an introduction though. Drummond, tell us a little bit about Evernym and what does a Chief Trust Officer do?
So Evernym is a vendor in the self-sovereign identity or decentralized identity market space. And that means we have a platform for issuing, holding, and verifying digital credentials. And since that, a platform like that encompasses obviously digital identity, but also the security and privacy of that. When you roll all that together, we're about enabling digital trust relationships. And so my job is to basically oversee the architecture of the protocols and what we need to do to enable our customers to use that platform to achieve digital trust. So that's the best answer I can give you.
Yeah, and let's dig into that a little bit though. So you threw out some terminology that some may not know, and so I'm going to ask on their behalf. What is a digital trust and what is a credential? I mean, what are you referring to? And can you give a use case example?
Yeah.
In that point.
You have my favorite prop, credentials. Anything that we would use in a wallet today when we need to prove our identity in a case where we need to be trusted to do something, right? To get on a plane, to rent a car, to get a hotel room, to register for an account someplace, to get a job, to get a loan, all those places where some party, it's often called a relying party in the world of SSI, they call it a verifier of the credential, needs to verify some information about you in order to develop a trust relationship of any kind. And so we always talk about the trust triangle involved with any kind of credential, whether it's physical or digital, which is somebody issues these credentials to me. Mm-hmm. I am called the holder because I hold them in my wallet and I hold them securely, and then I make the decision when I go to a party that needs to verify them, what credentials am I willing to share, and they make the decision what credentials are they willing to accept, right? They know who they would trust.
So let's do a really simple example. So you noted like one example is an airline, right? So an airline has issued me a credential, AKA a ticket.
Yep.
And that comes to me. And then I want to then verify that ticket. So I walk up to the counter of the airline and I hold them my digital ticket, and the airline then can verify that. And so that's the credential. And the trust part comes into play in that the protocols and the networks and the infrastructure that are enabling that exchange, all of mechanisms like what Evernym provides, is trusted. And so therefore we can then, and trusted in the sense that it's secure, and then I can be pretty darn sure that the Michael Becker handing me this ticket is in fact Michael Becker and the person that is allowed to do that.
Exactly.
A decent example.
Yeah, although you also, that particular example is the simplest of all cases, which is the issuer of the ticket was the airline, and they're also the verifier. That's very, very common, right? Yeah. However, what's really powerful about credentials of all kinds, but especially when we make them digital, is that the issuer can be one case, like in this case, I've got a passport card here, right? That's issued to me by the federal government, but it's accepted by airlines and hotels and all kinds of folks out there that are not the issuer of that credential. So
let me give you another example then, because and I think that just to kind of keep the conversation going in that regard. So another example with that would be I'm issued my driver's license. And today, if I want to go to a bar, they're going to say, hey, are you over 21? And so I've now got to pull out my driver's license and show them my physical driver's license to prove I'm over 21 to get it, to buy some alcohol. The problem with that scenario today is I'm giving them way too much information. They now have my picture. They now have my name. They now have my address. They have now my hair color. They have my eye color. They have my date of birth. They have my actual driver's license ID number. They've got all of this information. And so what you're saying in the more advanced example is I can walk up, the government can give me in this case, in the United States, it would be the DMV, the driver's license motor vehicles group would issue me a digital driver's license. When I go to the bar says, are you over 21? I pull out a QR code on my phone that says yes. And they scan that QR code. And in the process of scanning that QR code, the system, all powered by programs and players like Evernym, reaches out to the what is often called the ledger and says, is this person over 21? And the answer comes back as yes. So so in that case, the bar essentially says, yes, he's over 21, I can serve him, and I, the individual, have not disclosed too much information. Now you cringed there a little bit. Does that get it generally right? Or
you got it generally right. There's one particular from a privacy standpoint, one particular point I want to point out, which is when the bar is verifying, scans that QR code, and now I'll take out, I'll switch props here because we're assuming I'm using this as my digital wallet, right?
Yeah.
It does need to reach out to the ledger, but not for any information about me. There's no personal data about me on the ledger.
Just for information about that credential.
What it's reaching out is to get the public key of the issuer.
Yeah.
And so it can verify, yep, the issuer signed that credential, and whatever proof I've given, in that case, just I'm over 21, they basically can verify, yep, that issuer has issued that. That to prove you're over 21 with a credential that has your date, you need to use zero knowledge cryptography. We won't go down into the details about that, but the bottom line is it's exactly what the bar can do is they can just find out you're over 21, and that's based on a credential from the state of Washington in my case. Yep. And they can have digital, cryptographic certainty in that. And if they can also bind that to me, then you're right. Okay, we've solved the problem.
So let's take a big step back. So I thoroughly geeked out and loved what we just went through. And there was tons and tons of like technology and protocols and language and stuff that we'll certainly need to dig through, possibly not today, but at another time. But for those that were listening to that and started hearing, the Charles Schultz Peanuts example, when Charlie Brown's talking to the teacher and all they hear is the words that they absolutely can't understand, that's okay. You eventually will. But the key point in this kind of preamble of the conversation is there is this new concept powered by players like Evernym that will enable to do just what we talked about, the ability for someone to get a digital certificate or license or credential, if you will, and then they can walk up to somebody and say, here's my information, and that somebody can then come back and say, got it, thank you. You are who you are, or that data that you're providing me is in fact authenticated, and I can trust that that data is in fact accurate and is verified by whoever issued it. Is that all?
Exactly.
Okay, that's a good summary. So let's now go back to the beginning preamble of what my questions are. Let's talk about, so my understanding is based on what we just talked about. That's kind of like an end state. But let's start where we are today. So when I ask the question, what is the personal data and identity marketplace? What's your response to that?
Well, ironically, the part of that I think is the largest market for that is one that, myself, Evernym, we're not part of at all, which is the market in personal data about individuals, largely from data brokers and third-party sources and the surveillance economy. It's a ginormous industry, and I am not an expert in it at all, other than the portion of how do we get out of this surveillance economy and into something that would, some people are calling, first-person data, as in I'm actually sharing with the parties, the relying parties, the verifiers, the interested parties that I want to have relationships with, what they need to know about me, or what I want them to know about me. But I that other market, the market for that personal data that's from third-party sources, in large part not permissioned, but even permissioned. I mean, that's a enormous market, and I'm not a specialist in that.
Yeah, well, yeah, and let me help just for those that are listening. I can put some numbers to that if you don't mind, because you agree that I'm not you're not the SME in that space. So to your point, there is this massive third-party market out there, or let's say there is a market out there for personal data and identity information. And that is, and you raised really two important points that I want to kind of tease out in this response. Is one point you talked about these third-party data brokers, and looking at market analysis, there's just in the United States alone, there's roughly 4,000 active third-party companies that are collecting, buying, and selling data about US citizens and people from around the world every day, all day. And they're both collecting that information, selling that information directly to companies that are in fact using it, like a retailer or a brand, or they're selling that data amongst themselves. And that marketplace, because there are companies within that marketplace that are generalists of collecting data, and then there are companies that are specific data brokers about specific types of data, like healthcare data or financial data or things of that nature. That marketplace, that third-party data marketplace, is and you said it's ginormous. I mean, in the US alone, it's estimated to be today about a $238 billion, $240 billion market. By 2025, it's estimated to be about a $400 billion market in the US alone. So to your point, ginormous, big.
Yeah.
Now, the next piece, though, that I think is important to kind of tease out what you said was you also have what we call first-party data market. And the first-party data market is when I have a relationship directly with a brand, whether or not it's a retailer, a bank, or an institution, and I've logged in or they've asked me and I've completed a form either physically or digitally, and I've explicitly shared information with them. That's called first party. The other one's called third party. In the third party world, data is either bought and sold and collected either by public institutions or other methods, often like dark patterns and other things like that. And the methods on how they collect data is something we can discuss at a later date. So the one other party, so we've heard this first party and the third party. The other party that we might slip in there is what we'll call second party. And that second party are the representatives that are helping those first parties. So for instance, a marketing agency or a strategy agency that's supporting a retailer. That second party may gain access to personal information collected by the brand or retailer for the purpose of helping the brand or retailer process it. That second party is not in the business of brokering or selling it, but they are in the business of using the data. So that's kind of the first third party marketplace model. And to your point, it's worth today billions. When you think about the nature of personal data being used as an asset for brokering and selling information. Now, where I think this might go, and let me ask you now a question. So did I generally get that right based on your experience?
Yep.
So that, so based on your experience, though, you've said, like, this is kind of not okay, and there are some people that are, consider that where the consumer is the product. They're essentially the entree on the table and being consumed by industry. I jokingly refer to that as the modern day Soylent Green. While we're not physically eating each other, we are digitally eating each other. So that's what's happening today in that current marketplace. Now, you alluded to there's some other alternative future within this direction of where the personal data and identity marketplace would go, where effectively we're taking the individual off of the table as the food and giving them a seat at the table as a participant in the industry for the exchange of their information. Am I putting your words in your mouth, or do you you agree with this, or this is where
I agree with it? I agree with it completely.
Yeah.
No, that is totally again, this industry that broadly gets referred to as self-sovereign identity, or SSI, or decentralized identity. The focus today is on how it can enable individuals to use digital credentials to just simplify, streamline the digital identity experience. In other words, onboarding as a new account or authenticating when you're transacting on the internet. But behind it, what we have is that technology that enables that actually underneath what you're forming is strong and persistent digital relationships, connections between you and the parties that you're transacting with. And because you're forming that, and when I say strong, I mean they're cryptographically secure connections for the exchange initially of, oh, we're going to exchange credentials so that a trust relationship's in place. But what folks don't realize is we're laying the essentially roadway for now ongoing confidential, is the term we like to use, relationships that for exchange of any kind of information and increasingly building trust relationships and sort of these rich personal channels.
Yeah.
And that, I believe, I mean, I think what's going to happen, I mean, to put it in the terms you just used, Michael, we're going to move a lot of the third-party data market over to first-party because we're going to make it much simpler for individuals to be able to share rich data about themselves without a lot of work. Yeah, I mean, you nailed it when you said, oh, today, if I'm going to share that information with a brand, I've got to go in and type and fill out a form or link together information. I got to do it all manually, right? If I have a rich, not just, you know, obviously it's a digital wallet, but if you think of it as a digital persona or profile from which I can share information, you know, in a click, I could share reams of information about me if I trusted the brand with it and what value they were going to provide me. That changes the picture. I think it potentially changes the picture as much as the web changed the picture for, you know, for that third-party data.
Yeah, no, I think this is really valuable. And there's a famous Newsweek comment. I think it was Mulaney, if I pronounce his name correctly, where in 2014 he had noted this personal data market, this personal internet that is emerging, is going to be bigger than the internet, you know, in terms of its effect on human society. I'm paraphrasing the quote. It's not, I kind of butchered it a little bit, but that's generally the idea. We've had this thing called the internet. We're now going to have this thing called the personal internet, and the personal internet, or the internet of me, is the internet where I'm actually participating in the exchange of my information. And essentially, leaders of industry suggest and think that that's going to be bigger than the internet as we know it today. When the internet as we know it today is pretty darn big. And I think why it's going to transform so much is, as you've been talking about, it's going to allow us to have that really secure, rich, bi-directional exchange of really intimate details about ourselves in a secure environment with, and frankly, a lot less friction. And I think that's why it's going to get so big. Now, a couple other things that I just want to verify for those that are listening to this. So when we talk about this, what is this personal data and identity marketplace? And today we talked about it being this kind of this wild west of our data is out there, and the model is whoever can scoop it up, do something with it, can make income from it, and they own it, right? It's that kind of model that we exist today. And you're suggesting that a potential direction of the marketplace is we add some new infrastructure into the internet that allows the first party businesses, and let's again redefine that term, brands, retailers, the companies I'm directly doing interactions with, and myself, to be able to have a bidirectional exchange of information securely with it, at least amount of friction possible. And when we say securely, also trusted. So I know who you are, you know who I am. We can both be assured that the data that's being exchanged is encrypted. Therefore, no one else other than within this relationship can have access to that data. I think that's what we mean by trust in this context. As opposed to the existing marketplace today, while we do have mechanisms like encryption, and we do have some mechanisms on the brand side, at least the retailer side, at least, for them to try to either specifically know who I am or guess who I am with fairly good reliability. And so in some ways there's somewhat of a one-directional trust. One of the problems that exist in today's market and the way it's evolved today, and this is not necessarily against anyone else, it's just that the evolution hasn't happened yet, and it's happening now because of players like Evernym. We're going to get to a bi-directional trust where not only will it be, I know, the brand knows me, aka know your customer, the future that I think what you just told me is, well, I as an individual, there's going to be a know your sender model too.
Totally.
I'm going to get to know I can trust that it's actually Amazon I'm talking to and not some fake Amazon, right? So there'll be a know your sender capability there too, as part of that trust mechanism. Is that what you're partly what you're telling me? And
Absolutely, it's critical. I just was reporting on right now with the cybersecurity issues we're having. 5 times more cybersecurity incidents start with phishing attacks than any other form, which means basically people who cannot verify who they're dealing with are falling prey to, phishing emails, spear phishing, clicking on links that they shouldn't because they have no way. I tell the story that in the last month, I've received 2 emails that, I'm a full-time professional in this industry, right? I have all these tools and things at my disposal. One of them took roughly, I'd say 6 or 7 minutes for me to figure out if that was a legitimate email. The other one, and both of these involve, as a good attempt would, my duties as an officer of Evernym, right? Is this something real that I'm supposed to take action on, or is this just an extremely well done phishing attempt? The other one actually took 2 rounds of interaction with others at my company to determine that one of them turned out to be real and one of them was an extremely well done phishing attempt. And it took, altogether that took, I'd say an hour of my time just to discriminate on something that frankly should have been, it should never even come to my attention. The real one should have reached me and the other one should have never gotten there. And that's how bad the problem's gotten.
And if it did get there, I should have tools on my end to like near instantaneously tell me, watch out, right? So
exactly.
So I think we pretty well answered the current state of the personal information and identity marketplace. There's a big market, and again, this is not to be overly critical for the industry. Data out there in the market has incredible value, right? We want we want this information to be flowing back and forth because that's how value is created. That's how companies will be of service to me. So we're not trying to kill industry with this conversation that we're having. We're actually
quite the opposite.
We're quite the opposite. We're trying to make it more efficient, more effective, more trusted, more secure, so that even more economies and connections and communications can happen.
Exactly, and much more successful. Today my interface, right, as a person, literally, right, is, I on the digital realm, okay, it's not one but a set of email addresses, right, and then it's the properties I go out and point my browser at, and it's like between the email attempts coming at me to try and penetrate my defenses, or when I go to sites, how much can they learn about me? How many, basically bots can they set on trying to analyze what I might be looking at or what I might pay attention to sort of penetrate my defenses, right? It's all based on a defensive posture about we're constantly like, whoa, what, because we can't trust anything out there, right?
Right.
If we turn that around and the norm becomes when I'm connecting someplace, I'm feeling comfortable and confident that that's someplace that I know where I'm connecting and they know me, right?
Yeah.
And we know that it's a secure, private, confidential conversation. Then I'm not going to be in this posture of like, I can reveal as little as possible because I'm just knowing I'm beginning attack all the time to basically opening up and saying, no, I want you to have this information because I want you to serve me better.
Right.
And vice
versa. I actually want you to know that I'm male, that I'm my age, that I have this kind of car, that here's my food dietary preferences, and I'm actually going to give you my real birth date, not a fake one, because I want you to know me and to service me.
Yes.
And as opposed to what a lot of people do today is like provide brands with fake information because they don't trust the situation.
Totally.
Got it. Okay. So there's a tremendous opportunity here. So in our last few minutes, and thank you very much for that setup. I think we cleared up a lot. So can you summarize then what do we collectively, the individual, the private institution, and public institution need to know? Like, what are the 2 or 3 things in the context of where we're at today and where we're going? What do they need to know? How would you summarize that?
I take a deep breath because I think the job of those of us in the industry that are trying to engineer, this new future is to simplify. Today, you need to know, you need to understand things about technology and how it's deployed and how the standards are happening and evolving in the industry and things like that. Very much like, to use an analogy, Michael, in the early days of the web, you couldn't just say, all right, well, we need a website, and you can literally take your browser and go around and today it's like, oh yeah, you're just using the web all the time, right? It's something we all know about. Well, we're in the early days of like, okay, we're creating this new, private web, as it were. And what we need to get to is to make it really easy, that it's built in, the tools you're using in your customer relationship management system, they're already plugged in to this new SSI infrastructure. And creating a digital relationship with a new customer is something that's super easy on both sides, right? I have a digital wallet. I can, scan a QR code or click on a link that my wallet and what we call the agent is going to say, yeah, we've checked this out. This is a legitimate outfit. In fact, 3 of your friends have a relationship with this brand, right? I mean, how cool would that be if I don't rely on Facebook or some third-party service, but I'm looking at a new website and my own wallet and my agent is telling me, oh, your wife was using the site 2 weeks ago, right?
Yeah, and here's the necklace she was looking at, and you might want to get it for her, that kind of thing.
She's
right?
assembling her wish list out there.
Yeah.
But because of our relationship, I'm able to actually literally go, what's on my wife's wish list for her birthday coming up, right? And I'm not going to Amazon to get that information. I'm getting it from her, and she's sharing it with me for obvious reasons, right? Now, I mean, how rich and how valuable, Michael, would it be to, to a retailer, for example, to get an item on my wife's wish list that either she or myself, right, can go, oh, I know that vendor, I know that, bingo. I'm buying it in my wallet.
Right.
I'm not going to a site because it's going to go there and place the order and everything. It's going to be done, but I don't even have to go. I can just, that decision is made. I mean, that's where commerce going.
Yeah, and actually, I often refer to that, and the quote I use for that is what. So I'm going to put words in your mouth if you don't mind, because it helps me simplify it.
Sure.
So what you're telling me is what we need to know is, because of this new infrastructure that's emerging, the individual is going to become the point of discovery and the point of sale and the point of support. Everything is going to revolve to the individual where they are and where they choose to be, not where you necessarily want me to be. So I become the point of everything, basically, in the entire consumer experience. The other thing I heard you say, that what we need to know is that we, the public private institutions, need to know that, yes, it is incredibly complicated today, and people don't want it to be complicated. They want it to make it easy, and we've got to simplify our language and our technology. And then I think what, if I can interject, what we, the industry, and public and private institutions, all of us need to know is that's going to take time.
Yeah.
Right. It's as the famous Mark Twain quote, I apologize for the length of this letter because I didn't have time to write it. To make it
short. Yeah.
Simplicity takes time, so it's going to take us a bit more time.
That's a really, really good way to put it. That we are. I mean, the good news is we are. We're far beyond the theoretical now. We are delivering solutions. I like to point out that digital credentials, right? In fact, the ones we need to deal with COVID right now. I mean, just yesterday, IATA announced that the Emirates airline, all of their routes are now going to be take a digital credential for proof of your COVID health status, either test or vaccination. And there's, because Evernym supplies the digital credential technology that they're using, we know that there are dozens more airlines that have gone through the trials, they're ready to do it. So folks are going to be starting. I mean, we all have digital wallets on these phones today. They're just proprietary to Apple and Google, right? They're starting to announce, oh, we're going to start adding digital driver's licenses to those. And that is actually an open standard from ISO. It's different than the one that, for instance, IATA is using, but this stuff is going to converge. We're going to start being, using this, and we need to make it as simple as using a browser or using email out there. And we are on that path. And so maybe the most important thing to know is recognize, yes, we're on that path. We're going to make it simpler and simpler, and we're going to try and integrate those tools into what enterprises are using today with their CRMs. But investing in that and having your, not just what I like to point out, Michael, not just this isn't just an IT thing. I actually believe it will be soon much more important for the chief marketing officer and the customer relationship teams to look at these and start strategizing about how they use it. It was just like the web. The web initially was something that, hey, got to get our IT guys to figure out how to connect to this thing. Well, now they're way in the background, and how you use the web is up to your marketing team, right?
Yeah.
Same thing that will happen here.
Okay. So again, I think you brought out another what we need to know. And what we need to know is this is already commercially happening.
Yes.
And it's out there in the market, and people are using it, and businesses are using it. In fact, countries are using it for identity verifications and things like that. So this is happening at a grand scale worldwide right now. And I'm going to pull in another quote that I really love is from William Gibson. The future is already here. It's just unevenly distributed.
I love that quote.
And I think that's what you just said. The future is here. It's just not at scale yet globally.
Exactly. And talk about the uneven distribution. I think the most compelling thing, the evidence that's emerged just this summer, was the announcement by the European Union in June. We're going to introduce digital identity wallets for EU citizens across all of the EU by 1 year from now, from this September. They want it to be all of the EU and standardized credentials for, digital for citizens throughout the EU. Ontario, the province of Ontario in Canada, just announced the same thing, and their schedule is to have that a digital identity credential and a digital wallet, a standardized digital wallet for Ontario citizens by the end of March of next spring. So governments they're the uneven distribution right now, but they're moving.
And it's happening fast. I mean, again, just to put a little preamble, you and I have met each other, I think, 15 years ago or so. And, it took, 14 and a half years to get to where we're at right now.
Yes, exactly.
And now the momentum's going to pick up, and it's going to pick up fast. And so I think maybe I can interject and you can verify. The analogy I often like to take too is we need to realize that when we look at, say, the introduction of social media into our lives, all of Facebook, for instance, it took Facebook from about 2007 to 2019 to reach the 3.5 billion people market to make it really, the majority of people on the planet are using social media. But if you recall, when Facebook started, no smartphones, no broadband internet, no e-commerce, none of this infrastructure, none of the awareness that we have today, none of the skill sets that we have today. And so what took them 12 years, all of the impediments are gone.
Yeah.
And with this marketplace, it's not going to take 12. It's going to take 6 at most, maybe 3, or
exactly.
less.
I completely agree with you. And, the hard part in doing this, and I'm deep on the, technical side, the standards and everything, is to do all this in a safe way does require cryptography and everything. All right. It's just everything. You just got to bake it in. That was not done when the internet was created. They were like, we didn't need that at that time.
Science fiction. We don't need that right now, right?
Exactly. And frankly, it was just too hard, and it was too computation intensive, right? Now, there's as much power on this phone as there was, right, in the first spaceship we sent to the moon, right? So we've got
by many thousands of times, not just
exactly, by a lot. So we now carry around literally like little digital banks in our, right? We've got all the cryptography here. We've got, we've got the cloud, we've got blockchain for real sort of backbone. So
and let's not forget, we also have 5G. So we're going to have near instantaneous transmission of data
bingo.
in the coming months, right?
Exactly. And even, it always comes up, and I think it's a really important point. Yes, and the consumers that, many folks want to interact with will have smartphones, but we need an infrastructure that will work for everyone.
Mhm.
Well, the cloud and what we call cloud wallets, and guardianship of digital wallets will enable those who are not connected, who don't have smartphones, to still use this infrastructure. It's very important that it be governed properly, but we've had a couple centuries of developing that kind of thing too. So anyway, yeah, I'm very bullish about it. And you're right. I think it's now going to start to accelerate. It's just like the web, right? Folks think back and it was like, you know what? There had to be the first website, and then there had to be the first 10 websites, right? Well, those digital credentials and wallets are coming out now. But for example, besides IATA, there's over 100,000 digital credentials in use of credit union members in the U.S. and Canada, because they're just said, hey, we need to get together and find a standard way to solve this problem in the credit union industry. Yeah. So there you go. It's happening.
I'll give you one more example. Then I want to move to our last question. I was talking to, in one of a previous interview, I was talking to someone, and they're looking at doing this, for example, for all of the teachers throughout the country, and so that we can actually validate their teaching certificates, and especially for like potential, substitute teachers and all of those millions of people. This is just going to streamline everything. And right now it just takes so much time and effort and paperwork and overhead and expense to do what eventually will be done in seconds. So I think, so the other thing we need to know, and interpreting what you said earlier to me as well, is this is going to reduce friction. It's also going to reduce a ton of costs, which will then open up potential for that money, for those resources, for that human mind share to be used for other productive purposes.
Perfect example of that. So the NHS in the UK, National Health System, right? Because it's nationalized health, they have doctors and nurses that move between 2,500 facilities throughout the UK. Their own study showed that the doctors and nurses, 40,000 hours are being consumed every year by verifying the paperwork for a doctor or nurse, as that they are a real NHS employee as they go from facility to facility. And with COVID, there's been a lot of that. So it was actually 2 doctors there who said, we need to move to digital credentials. And they started a startup to do it. Evernym partnered with them very early on. And the NHS has now adopted a digital staff passport, right? Now, that's not just the cost savings, that's 40,000 doctors and nurse hours that go into healthcare instead of paperwork, right? That translates into lives saved, not just money.
So then I guess this is one more thing, and then we'll wrap up, and need to know is, going back to our original dialogue of valuing the personal data and identity marketplace. And I think it's very common for us in industry to look at the asset and look at the email address, and an email is worth X dollars and Social Security is worth Y dollars, and package that all up and we have an industry, right?
Yes.
What you're now referring to is another way to look at industry, is not the dollars and cents of the exchange of the asset, in this case, personal data or an identity token, but actually in the wealth creation that will occur. And if we actually look at it through that lens, we're not talking hundreds of billions, we're talking hundreds of trillions.
Yes, absolutely.
And the wealth creation and the fundamental transformation of society that will happen from this is going to be absolutely staggering.
I have an interesting way of looking at that I'm going to preface by saying that I'm the one of the co-editors of the decentralized identifier specification, which is just finishing 2 years of standardization W3C, but I've been working on it for the last 5 years. And this new type of identifier called a DID, I'm not going to say anything about the technology because it's the least friendly identifier you've ever seen, right? It makes IP address look friendly, right? It's just a long cryptographic number, but it's going to be down underneath, as I said, the roadway. And Michael, I'm going to suggest that in a couple of years, there's going to be a new metric that companies are going to use because when you form one of these digital relationships, right, and with anyone, right, literally my wallet talks to your wallet as a company, right, we exchange DIDs. They're called peer
Yes.
DIDs, pairwise peer DIDs. Every one of those is a persistent digital relationship for as long as the two parties want it. There is no intermediary, and those long cryptographic values are unique forever, right? There's never been a connection this strong in human history, okay, that will be this persistent. So the metric's going to be, if we call them connections, right? How many connections?
How many unique connections do we have?
Exactly. And because there's no faking that, right? How many customers you have, how many email addresses you have, as 20% of email addresses expire every year. It's just like, yes, how many mobile phone numbers do you have, right? But
Yes.
we're starting to get, go ahead.
No, please go ahead. I was getting excited.
I'm just saying, those are proxies, but the gold standard is going to become, how many DID connections you have, because that's the real metric, because every one of those is that rich channel. And yeah, anyway, I just wanted to point out.
I'm super excited about it. I mean, in that regard too, I mean, again, this is about you, not me, but if you go to my website, you'll see kind of the vision I have is there's really only 3 pillars to the future of consumer connected individual engagement. And those 3 pillars are connection, communication, and commerce. And the only way to lead to commerce is through connection and communication. And you just gave the metric I've been looking for the connection stage. And then once you have connection and you have truly secure, trusted connection, you then can have communication. Once you have communication with authenticated data, we can then have really rich, hyper predictive, personalized experiences. All the wife gifting example that we were talking about earlier, that will lead to commerce. And that's the future of everything, in my opinion.
I just +1.
I heard you say woo. Yeah, I saw your face. I think you like that. So that's
good. I like it a lot. Yeah, that is great.
Please take it. So with that in mind, then let's go to the last question. We have about 5 minutes left. What do we need to do? What do individuals need to do? What does a public institution need to do? What does a private institution leader need to do right now today?
Okay. I will start with the simplest thing. Individuals, I don't think have to, for individuals, what they need to basically look out for is, remember when the web was starting, it was like somebody introduced you to your first browser, right? And it was like, okay, I'm going to get a browser. Okay. The equivalent, what we're talking about here is you're going to get a wallet, right? And you're probably actually going to get multiple wallets initially. And we have this whole thing about, will wallets be embedded in each of the apps you use, or will you end up with a sort of generalized wallet the way we use a browser to do, talk to
or the way we use our wallet today? I've got 5 credit cards all on the same wallet.
Yeah, exactly.
Individual wallets for each of our credit cards.
Yeah, I think the bottom line is it's going to converge over time, and you don't really need to worry about it. But what you're looking from an individual, you're going to have an opportunity, just like wallets being built into our phones, right? But these are not going to be the phone wallets. These are going to be open standard wallets that will work. And what then you'll start being offered credentials. You'll be scanning, said, hey, scan a QR code, and you're going to get a credential, and you're going to start to be able to use that. And I think it'll be as natural as people adopting browsers. Right. So I think it's going to be, the same thing had to happen there. Someone had to develop a browser before people could start using it. So that's my answer on that.
But I want to stop on the people though. So what I heard you say on the people, what they need to do is be aware that this is coming and don't be afraid of it.
Yes.
And be willing to try it.
Yeah, exactly.
Trust it. And,
well, if we get to,
but trust but verify, right? Try
absolutely.
it. Experiment with it. Get to that point where you trust. So that's what people need to do.
Yes.
What does a private institution need to do?
So I think private institution needs to, these are of course, what we're trying to do, places like Trust over IP is plow that road, get those standards in place, get the best practices in place. So I think it's basically pay attention to the opportunities that are going to be coming to integrate this in. Look at integrating this technology in initially with your, from a security standpoint, as in improvements to your website, because what will be coming is, call it, wallet-based authentication, right? often the industry term right now is passwordless authentication. And Microsoft, for instance, now it's just changing all of its properties now, consumer-facing properties they're dropping the password. You're going to start using, they call it Microsoft Authenticator. It's a very simple digital wallet. And Google's already trying to move, quietly moving everyone over to the same thing, so that you just have a much stronger relationship, at least with those large vendors. So I think every company should be looking at, okay, how am I going to start to support digital credentials, digital wallets with my systems? And then they should start planning for, as this comes, how are we going to support these new personal connections?
And those new experiences. So in that regard, then going back to what you said earlier, what companies need to do is, I'm gonna try to bring together a number of points that we talked about.
Yes.
So what I'm just to summarize, what I hear you say companies need to do is, you need to realize this technical juggernaut is coming, right?
Yes.
So recognize it's coming. Don't be afraid of it. Get your IT team, your marketing team, your sales team, your customer services team together to come up with the best customer experience.
Yes.
More importantly, get your C-suite team involved, and do so now, today, because it's going to be here in 3+ years, if not even
exactly.
Right. But if you're like a long tail retailer, you may have a little bit more time, but it's going to be here sooner before you know it.
Exactly. And there's one specific opportunity that I think, it depends on who you are and where you are in your industry and everything else, but folks are starting to wake up to it, which is, just as if you were the first one in your industry to have a website when browsers were catching on, you got a nice uplift in business, and folks bookmarked you and referred people to you. Okay. The equivalent here is, are you in a position to issue the credential that will become the one, standardized in your industry? That's what the credit union said. You know what? We want to leg up on the banks. We think they're going to be slower. They put together a consortium, and they're issuing a digital credential for credit union membership today. It's, if it keeps growing the way it is, it's going to give them a leg up in that industry. So in every industry, I predict there's going to be a dominant credential. Sometimes I call it the killer credential, except we're on COVID. I try not to use that term, but anyway.
And the last company, public institutions, our policymakers, what do they need to do? What do they need to do?
That one's the most straightforward answer I'm going to give you in the whole thing. Look at what the EU is doing. Look at what Ontario, BC Gov, Quebec are doing in Canada. Start a program to issue a digital identity credential to your citizens, and start tying your infrastructure into that to use it. It is the best move you will make as a government in service of your citizens and digital infrastructure for your economy.
And if you don't mind, may I interject one more on that? Would be, take the time to learn the technology yourself, especially for those countries like the United States that are sectoral based, not federalized for a lot of industry, and try to understand these technologies in the context of that industry. So they're, and then do appropriate policy with the technology of what it is now and today, not what you thought it was 10 years ago.
Bingo. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, hey, this was awesome. I had a great time. Yay. Thank you very much. And I think our listeners on this will really enjoy it as well. Do you have any parting remarks for us, or?
I'm really excited that you're doing this. I've, been a big believer that we could sort of open up a whole new or switch the norm for the treatment of personal data on the internet. It's been a long, as long as I've known you, we've been working on that. But I feel like, okay, we've crossed the threshold now. We're headed now in a direction where we really can change that. And I think that it's that classic, I forget which law it's called, right? That we overestimate the impact of a new technology in the short term, and we underestimate it in the long term. I think
Gates said that. That was a Bill Gates comment, and I think
that's exactly what's going to be the case here. But I think that overestimation. I mean, the Gartner hype cycle, which I assume most folks listening to this would be familiar with, right now has decentralized identity at the top of the hype curve, right? It's like, okay, digital credentials and whilst all that. It's true. But I think what's going to happen is the trough is going to be a lot shallower than people think. and the what they
The
call it,
plateau of productivity.
plateau of productivity is coming faster than folks. Again, look at the curve on the web. Okay, I do think, Michael, we're going to be very closely following the curve on the web. And when that started rising, it kept going pretty fast.
Yeah, it's going to hockey stick for sure. Well, thank you very much. This was really great, and hopefully have you back.
All right. Well, I appreciate it, and good luck with the show.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.
You bet. Bye-bye.